Thank you. Good evening. It appears that we have a quorum. I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee of July 26, 2022 at 5:31 p.m. First item, approval of minutes. Draft minutes of the June 28, 2022 Finance Committee meeting.
I move approval.
Approval made by Alder Wheeler. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of approving the draft minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Item 3, public appearances, non-agenda items. Doesn't appear we have anybody in chambers or on Zoom. And confirmed by Scott Yarborough. And we will move on to the next item, the finance, item 4, Finance Director Report. And we will be covering the Treasurer's reports for February 28th, ending March 31st, and April 30th, 2022. Misty, you have the floor.
Thank you. So as you know, I've been a little bit behind in the Treasurer's report, so you got 3 of them tonight, February, March, and April. May is actually also done. It's out on the website, but I didn't get it done in time for the packet. And then my plan is to have June also done for our next meeting so that we're caught up. At this point in these Treasurer's reports, so in February, we would have collected all of taxes and settled with all of the county or all of the taxing jurisdictions. So you'd have seen our cash dropped at the end of February as compared to January. March is relatively stable. And then in April, we do have the lottery credit settlement. So we would get a fair amount of money in April and then settle that out get a fair amount of money in March, settle that out in April. So there was some variances in there with our cash position. But if you have any questions, obviously I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, very good. Questions from the committee? Hearing none, we will move on. Thank you, Misty.
I actually have more to report on if that's okay.
Oh, go ahead.
So some other things happening. So the CIP is getting adopted tonight. So we have our amendments that we'll talk about at the council meeting. At the end of that, we will then have an adopted CIP, which is great timing because budget is kicking off. Tomorrow you get to hear from me again at the Committee of the Whole to talk about budget process and priorities. Worksheets were actually due from department heads today. So we're really kind of getting into the heat of the budget process. We're working through quite a bit of the town details still. Chad mentioned in one of our meetings today that we're 90 days out, which seems hard to believe, but there's a lot of details that we still have to make sure are taken care of, and we'll report back as those are known. And then the last thing is this will be our last meeting where we have to start early because public safety was there. With COVID, we were trying to not have meetings overlap. But at this point, we are comfortable having meetings overlap again. So Finance Committee will continue to be in the chambers. Public Safety will be over in the Genie Ceiling Room. And then our normal start time will be 6 o'clock then instead, which of course we will adjust forward or back depending on the agenda. But we won't have to end early because of Public Safety. We just have to be done by the time council starts.
Very good. Anything else? All right, well, thank you. Any questions before I move on? Hearing none, moving on to item 5, review of bills. 5A, detailed review of checks for $10,000 and above for the period of June 16th through July 15th, 2022, totaling $1,165,102.95. Questions from the committee? Hearing none. Moving on to item 5B, detailed review of all checks issued. Checks 123608 through 123733 for the period of June 16th through July 15th, 2022, totaling $1,363,087.79. Questions from the committee? Yes, Alder Gerhardt, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm looking at page 11 of this section, page 124 of the packet. And it's a charge from 722 Blue Jeans fee for April and May. I'm curious what that might be.
Blue Jeans is a software used in the fire department to facilitate their online trainings. And I know the fire chief is having discussions with the IT director to see if, Zoom or some other virtual platform is a better option now. but Blue Jeans has been the software that's been used for several years for that purpose.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more question. Page 15 of the packet, page 128 of the packet, 15 of the section. A question about Ray O'Haran Company at the very bottom. I assume that this is ammunition for the police department, but I'm actually not 100% sure what those abbreviations mean. Can you confirm that that's what that is?
So it's definitely for the police department, and it's related to their firearms. I couldn't say if it's the actual firearms or the ammunition, but it is one of those.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Additional questions? Yes, Alder Wheeler.
On page 1 of 16, it says that we pay back our unused county grant money in Dane County Department of Human Resources. What are we giving back? What grant was that?
1 second.
It's on page 114.
Yeah, so that is the Neighborhood Navigator grant. It was actually a 2021 grant that we didn't use all of the funds, so we needed to reimburse the county for those unused funds in 2022. We actually expect that we will have to issue a refund for some of those funds for 2022 as well. There's 2 Navigator positions that were funded by the grant, one of which was vacant for a fair amount of time. So obviously our costs are less than what we had thought. And we bill them up front, and they pay us up front.
Okay, so in the future, will we be hiring another neighborhood navigator, or?
So that I'm not certain. That I'll have to get back to you on.
Okay. Chad's going to answer
Yeah.
the question.
City Administrator Chad Brecklin was joining us. So,
Misty, I just wanted to save you from having to report back on at least one item. So we have been advertising periodically to fill the neighborhood navigator position that has been vacant, and we've been unsuccessful in our recruitments, our multiple recruitment efforts. So we'll continue to attempt to fill those positions, or that one remaining position, but at this point in time, it's not known when it'll be filled.
Thank you.
thank you, Chad. All right. Seeing no other questions, we will move on to item 5C. Detailed review of all ACH payments for $10,000 and above for the period of June 1st through the 30th, 2022, totaling $481,918.33. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, hearing none, moving on to item 5D, detailed review of all ACH payments for the period of June 1st through the 30th, 2022, totaling $589,109.49. Questions from the committee? Hearing none, moving on to 5E, detailed review of P-card transactions for $10,000 and above for the cycle ending June 6, 2022. Total dollars, none. Questions from the committee? Hearing none, moving on to item 5F, review of P-card transactions for the cycle ending June 6, 2022. Total dollar amount, $135,661.93. Questions from the committee? Alder Gerhardt.
I have a question about, it's 2 charges. There's like the fraudulent charge from Bellaby Inc., and then there was that, I saw that there was that refund later. I just wanted to, curious what that, was there a stolen card or was it just an accident?
So not a stolen card, but the information was stolen. So typical credit card fraud. We have full protection in that area. So the employee noticed that there was a fraudulent charge on their card. We contact the credit card company and then we are reimbursed in full.
Great.
Similar to you had fraud on your personal card.
Awesome.
Very good. Additional questions? Go ahead, Alder Gerhardt.
The other thing is that I just want to confirm. So the P-card transaction, it actually repeats the whole section. It repeats starting on page 155, starting again at 5.6. So I just want to make sure that there wasn't supposed to be 2 reports, because it's the agenda says we're only looking at the period of
June 6th.
through June 6th. So I assume it was just an error. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something missing that was intended to be there.
No, I think it's just a duplication. I'll
Yeah.
double check, but it should just be the one cycle that we're approving.
Great, thanks.
Okay, very good. Additional questions? Hearing none, we will move on to action items. Item 6A, motion to approve Resolution R-132-22, approving agreement with KL Engineering for construction-related services for 2022 South Sain Road reconstruction, and this is a direct referral.
I move approval.
Approval made by Alder Gerhardt. Misty, you will speak to this, or?
Actually, Bill Balke is here, the Public
Oh, he
Works
is.
Director.
He chimed in. All right. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're trying to get this contract approved for when we approved the construction contract back in early July, but due to some issues with the price that we had to delay that and work out the funding for it. So tonight you'll see the approved contract that we had negotiated. We took out, some of the inspection things that we'll be doing in-house, such as our sanitary and sewer water inspection. So the price was reduced somewhat for input from our staff that we can afford to do. We have a budget amendment that is associated with this too. We are using some funds from projects that are not going to be completed this year. The Floran project is one of them that the city funded in 2022 that we're not going forward with this year. So we're going to use part of that money for this project. And then we also had some unexpended funds from the McKee Road project, stormwater project that was completed 2 years ago, and we will be using the funding for that. And as Misty likes to say, I think we need a 2/3 vote for approval on this contract and the budget amendment.
At council, yeah.
And council, yeah. Very good. Questions, discussion from the committee? Hearing none, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Bill. Moving on to action item 6B, motion to approve Resolution R-133-22, approving the project plan and establishing the boundaries for the creation of tax incremental district number 14, City of Fitchburg, Wisconsin. Plan Commission Resolution PCR-01-22, designating proposed boundaries and approving a project plan for tax incremental district 14, City of Fitchburg, Wisconsin.
I move approval.
Approval made by Alder Wheeler. And Misty, do I turn this over to you or directly to Greg?
I can start it.
Okay.
So Greg Johnson from Ellers, who is the city's financial advisor, is here to walk us through this TID creation and the project plan that's there, as well as a little bit of TID background information. So thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Misty. Good evening. I'm going to go through this presentation. This is really just a summary of the project plan document that was included in your packet. There's no new information that's included in this report. It's just to kind of give the high points of the purpose and background of TID District number 14. Just to kind of explain where we are in terms of the timeline for the creation of this district, this slide outlines kind of the timeline that's required by statute and the various steps to create a new TIF district. This process began back in June with the convening of the Joint Review Board that consists of all the taxing jurisdictions and a public member. It's the first required meeting to create a TIF district. That meeting was organizational in nature. No action was taken, but the Joint Review Board was given an overview of TIF District number 14. The next step in the process occurred later that evening. There was a required public hearing that occurred before the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission approved a resolution creating TID District number 14, And now this evening will be consideration by the Common Council to create TID District number 14. So approval is required at all of those steps. And then if approval is received by all those bodies, the final step in the process is the final convening of the Joint Review Board to consider creation of the district. And that is scheduled for August 10th if approvals are received this evening. Before I speak to the specifics related to TID District number 14, I just wanted to provide a brief overview of how tax incremental finance districts work. The city has several TIF districts that have been open historically, so just wanted to kind of provide that brief background information. So at the time a TIF district is created, all the property within a TIF district has an existing taxable value. That is what is referred to as the base value. So using TID 14 as an example, the base value of that district will be the value of all the property within the boundary as of January 1st of 2021. So all of the, 2022, all of the taxes collected on that base value, the existing value that's there presently, will be received by all the taxing jurisdictions just like it is presently. So the city will receive its share along with the county, the school districts, and the technical college. So there's no change in how that current property tax revenue is distributed. Where a TIF district provides financial benefits to the city is when there is new value or development that occurs within the boundaries of the TIF district. So whether any existing development that's there at the time the district is created appreciates in value, or more importantly, if new value is constructed, that increase in value is called the incremental value. So that value above the base is all that tax revenue that's collected from that increase in value is retained by the city. And the city keeps its share, the school district share, the county share, and the technical college's share, and uses that tax revenue to pay for eligible project expenses within the TIF district that were necessary to bring that development to fruition. So I mentioned the Joint Review Board, which is that panel that makes up of all the other taxing jurisdictions, is having the final approval of any new TIF district. And really what TIF is at the end of the day, it's a partnership between the city and the other taxing jurisdictions. They are agreeing to forego their share of tax revenue on that new development to use it to help pay for project costs and expenses necessary for that development to come to fruition. And the premise of TIF districts is, but for the utilization of a TIF district, that development might not happen at the same level of value, may not happen as quickly. There can be job creation or a whole host of factors that can be applied to a particular TIF district. And so the tax increment district uses the tax revenue from that defined geographic area to directly pay for the costs necessary for that development to occur. So that's kind of how a TIF district works, and really the financial benefit of a TIF district to a community if that incremental value is realized. Before I continue, any questions on just kind of the background information?
Seeing none.
So I'm going to begin by talking through a couple of the key statutory findings that have to be satisfied in order for the city to create a new tax incremental finance district. One of those tests is called the 12% test, and what that means is that if you take the incremental value of all of the city's current tax incremental districts, that cumulative incremental value from each district cannot exceed 12% of the city's total equalized value. So presently, active TIDs in the city are TID 4, TID 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. The current incremental value of those districts as of January 1st of 2021 is about $460 million. If we add in the projected base value of this district, which is approximately $4 million, we get to about $464 million of incremental value plus the base value of this proposed district. 12% of the city's total equalized value is $492 million. So we are under that 12% threshold, which means the city can complies with that 12% test. Now we're at an interesting time of the year in that new equalized values are going to be preliminary released next week by the Department of Revenue. However, the 12% test is applied based on the date a Common Council approves a TIF district. So if the Common Council chooses to create the TIF district this evening, the creation date is going to be July 26 of 2022. So the 12% test is calculated and applied based on the values available as of that date. So even though new equalized values will be available here within the next couple of weeks, we base it off of the January 1, 2021 values. Now I'll give an overview of tax incremental district number 14. So we included in the project plan a copy of the map in terms of the location of the proposed TIF district. You'll see the map that's kind of highlighted here on the screen. So we have Haight Farm Road to the north, Highway 14 to the east, and South Saline Road over to the west. So we have, several large tracts of land that are proposed to be included in this tax incremental finance district. The general purpose of the district is to pay for public infrastructure that's necessary for this area to develop, and also provide the city the option of providing development incentives if it's determined it's appropriate for a particular development proposal that may come forth. It's estimated that the majority of this undeveloped land will be developed as commercial with some residential components as well. So the general goal of the district is to help continue to facilitate some housing and some commercial development opportunities and take advantage of some larger tracts of land that are available to help accommodate that type of development. This proposed district is what's called a mixed-use district. And so one of the statutory tests that has to be satisfied for the mixed-use district is a land use test. And so not less than 50% of the area of the TIF district, or more than 50% is probably a better way of looking at it, must be suitable for some combination of residential, commercial, and industrial development. So you must have 2 out of those 3 land uses to qualify as a mixed-use district. And for any newly platted residential development, the amount of newly platted residential cannot exceed 35% of the area of the TIF district. So it's based on the gross acreage of the district. So for this district, we had to demonstrate that more than 50% was suitable for residential, commercial, and industrial, and less than 35% is for newly platted residential development. And we were able to demonstrate that we are in compliance with each of those tests. As I mentioned, the primary project costs that are identified in this project plan, and we'll look at a detailed list in a moment, is public infrastructure, streets, utility improvements necessary to help bring development to the boundaries of the TIF district. There's also allowances for development incentives, which the city can choose to award if appropriate, and require approval of a development agreement by the Common Council. We've also accounted for ongoing costs of the city for managing a TIF district, audits, annual TIF reporting, any legal reviews, things of that nature. The city's practices for determining if TIF assistance is awarded is to require a developer to go through an independent pro forma review to demonstrate that there's a financial gap in the project and that TIF assistance is necessary. And typically, the city structures its development incentives on what's called a pay-as-you-go basis, meaning that as that development generates increment, a portion of that is used to pay the incentive. And if the developer doesn't generate sufficient value to repay that incentive, the city is under no obligation to make up that shortfall. So within the project plan, we've listed various infrastructure projects, provided allowances for development incentives, and provided the city with flexibility on how those costs could ultimately be financed. Whether or not the city finances some of that infrastructure directly, requires that to be financed by a developer and potentially reimbursed through tax increment, or you may just require a developer to pay for some of it without any TIF assistance. When we look at the project costs that are identified in the plan, and the list in the project plan summarized here in this chart, it identifies about $34 million of public infrastructure, development incentives, and ongoing costs of the district. The project plan of the district determines which project costs are TID eligible. So while the project plan identifies $34 million of costs, approval of a project plan does not commit the city to undertaking any of these projects. It all requires your standard approval for any other public infrastructure projects, bidding, things of that nature, contract approval. So by approving a project plan, you're not giving the green light to any of this. You'll still have to go through the separate approvals. It just makes the projects TID eligible. Because if a project's not identified in a project plan, you need to amend it to allow such a project to be undertaken. So we've listed kind of a variety of infrastructure projects, water, sewer, some stormwater, and road extensions, and then again, allowances for developer incentives. So this kind of identifies kind of the dollar amount that the city has to expend within the district. The plan is written to give the city flexibility to move project costs between these types of projects if one project comes in less than another. So this kind of identifies the framework of which the city has to manage costs. Each of the projects in the plan had a project ID assigned to it. We've just included a map. This was also in the project plan that just identifies preliminarily where the estimated infrastructure is proposed to be constructed. So you can see it is anticipated to facilitate build out of the entire site. Also included in the project plan was a preliminary site concept, which I believe the city has seen previously. That's been proposed for development within the boundary of the TIF district. There's an existing industrial development kind of on the southern portion of the TIF district, and then there's a mix of commercial and residential development kind of on the northern half of the district. So this kind of delineates some of the anticipated land use based on the preliminary site plan. When we went through to determine the compliance with the mixed use tests that are required for this type of TIF district, we used this site plan to make sure again that the gross acreage did not include more than 35% newly platted residential. So we are under that threshold. One of the requirements that also has to be included in the project plan is a financial feasibility analysis. So to take a look at the potential performance of the TIF district based on the anticipated construction of that site layout, we've estimated the new amount of incremental value that could be generated on each lot within the proposed site plan. So these values that are included on the next 2 pages estimate how much new value is to be constructed in each year on each given lot. So this is an illustration. Development could happen, at a slower pace, could happen at a faster pace. This is kind of the best guess at the time that the TIF district is being created in terms of how the site build out could occur. So you can see that really construction is projected to occur from 2023 to 2032. Estimated incremental value if the entire site builds out as shown on the site plan is about $182 million of incremental value. Over the 20-year life of a TIF district, that would generate about $59 million of incremental value over 20 years. So a mixed-use district is open for 20 years. It can close earlier if the costs are recovered sooner or the city has exhausted any of the project expenses within the project plan. So we included a cash flow projection in the project plan that just kind of modeled out combination of development incentives, city financing of infrastructure. It's an illustration. It may not turn out as modeled here. In fact, it probably won't. Things typically ebb and flow with TIF districts. But looking at, a combination of some development incentives and city financing of infrastructure, it's projected that the TIF district could still close about a year early based on kind of this model and phasing in of project costs. So to kind of summarize this particular TIF district, to kind of go back to the summary slide, again, kind of the purpose is to help facilitate some commercial and residential development to the north of existing industrial development within the district. It's a mixed-use district by statute, so 20-year maximum life. Identified approximately $34 million of project costs consisting of infrastructure and development incentives, all of which would require approval by the Common Council before being funded and being paid for through the TIF district. So that's kind of an overview of the purpose and intent of TIF district number 14. I'll pause, see if city staff has anything further they'd like to add, and I'm happy to answer questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Misty, further comments?
No, nothing to add. Greg did a nice job summarizing.
Yep, very good. Then questions from the committee. Alder Gerhart.
I've got a couple, if that's okay. I would like to hear from Mike about if you would, just about like the rationale behind creating another one. You know, obviously this is only, my first time around, this was just an expansion of the TID. This is the creation of a new one. So it's obviously a new thing for me. I'm just curious if you can kind of, obviously, we meet all the requirements, you know, the letter of the law, that's great. And I do have a lot of faith in city staff in terms of, and in Ellers in terms of analyzing whether this is good for the city. But I just kind of want to get your explanation of why this is necessary.
Sure. Thank you. As we kind of stay ahead of the development requirements or requests and also development activity in Fitchburg, one of the reasons that we're excited about this development when Sarah Investment came forward with us in kind of collaboration with the Hartung brothers on this property is that we need to bring more kind of industrial land available in our inventory and have it kind of shovel ready and also have it in a TIF district that is already approved. One of the requests that Joyce and I get frequently through MadRep, our regional economic development partner, and then WEDC, our partner at the state, are various requests for proposals where we're asked to submit potential sites in Fitchburg for different developments. Over just the last probably 2 years, we've had anywhere from a biopharmaceutical company to a data center to another technology company and then some other warehouse and distribution companies. We've tried to be creative where we can find some sites where we've got some land available, and this has been one of the sites after it was brought forward from Sarah Investments. But as we go through that RFP process and we kind of check the boxes for the information that they're looking for and to be competitive, we haven't been able to check the box that it's, first of all, shovel ready and ready to go, that they could get a project in the ground in a fairly efficient period of time. And we also have not been able to check the box about, is there a TIF in place for development assistance for a particular project there. So that's one of the reasons why once we went under the 12% equalized value with the closure of TID 6, we had a window here to look at bringing forward this request to create a district at this location to better position our community to respond to those RFPs, not only for new companies, but also for existing companies that are looking for land. As we have, you know, conversations with some of our existing employers, in some cases it's a little hard to come up with some potential sites for them. We've been creative where we did that with the Promega project off of Lacey Road. Sub-Zero we've been able to accommodate. General Beverage, we worked with Payne and Dolan to come up with a creative way, but we just need more of that land in our inventory to better position us to be competitive. And it will go through our standard process, as Greg pointed out. If we do have a prospect, or let's say we're one of the finalists for one of those requests for proposals, it would go through our standard, you know, kind of pro forma review with the deposit required and the developer agreement, and it would be under the pay-as-you-go developer bond business model as well.
Do you have an additional question?
I can get some, follow-up. That's really helpful and really good to know that context. I guess I have a side question. So we're a growing city, and we have a lot of space to grow, which is unusual, I think, in the region, in the state of Wisconsin. So do we have a kind of a higher average? Obviously, there's that 12% equalized value cap, but do we have a higher than average amount of TIDs compared to other municipalities, or is this pretty typical? Do people typically stay right around 12%?
I'd say your number of TIF districts for a community of your size is pretty typical. You know, I think in terms of that 12% test, I mean, it's kind of a calculation that, you know, kind of dictates if you have a TIF district that's very successful, you've generated a lot of value, so you're over that 12% limit. So usually if you reach that point, it's because you've had some very successful TIF districts that have generated a lot of incremental value. Mike mentioned, you know, the recent closure of TID 6, and then this coming year, you know, you'll be looking at closing TID District number 4, which are the city's 2 largest TIF districts. So that's going to help regain some TIF capacity to, you know, potentially, you know, see if there's other opportunities. But I think in terms of, you know, the approach that the city's using and as Mike mentioned, kind of responding to kind of market conditions and being able to have some larger tracts of land, I think we see that a lot in terms of how TIFs are utilized to really try to facilitate some, you know, larger types of development that are going to face some obstacles, in this case, infrastructure that needs to be extended.
Okay. And just as a follow-up, in my limited experience, it seems like TIFs are often used for expansion of the city rather than redevelopment and infill. Is that typical, or does it depend on kind of the layout of the city?
I would say we're now using it for redevelopment just because Fitchburg's at that age. We're coming up on our 40th year as a city. And so some of those areas that developed when we were still a town, like North Fish Hatchery Road and kind of on the northwest side, of the city, we're going back in now and wanting to look at, redevelopment, revitalization, infill development in those particular areas. So that the TID district up on North Fish Hatchery Road is a redevelopment tax increment district. And I know I've already had some conversations with the mayor and with City Administrator Chad Brecklin and Finance Director Misty Dodge that once we close TID number 4 next year and we're under the 12% equalized value, there may be some strategic geographic TIDs that we want to look at that are maybe more smaller geographically, but kind of more targeted and focused on some of the redevelopment, like along Verona Road. Now that the Verona Road reconstruction is done, we've got a challenging situation where the buildings are kind of backwards. Their entrances are backwards to their access. And so that's an area that I think we may need to come in and utilize this local economic development tool to help encourage kind of reorientation and revitalization of some of those properties along that corridor to allow them to grow and prosper in that area and reinvest in their properties that make better sense as far as from a layout and orientation standpoint with the infrastructure changes that are over there. So I think we've got a combination of both there. And one thing I would add on to Greg's comment about the 12% is the reason, kind of a unique reason for both TID 6 and TID 4, both of those initial districts could have closed. They were very successful districts right from the get-go. But each one we amended very strategically here at the city. TID 6 we amended because we wanted to get Spoke and Sprocket in ahead of the Verona Road reconstruction to allow for better management of traffic while the Verona Road reconstruction was going on. And we had no other way to pay for that. And we also wanted to have our regional partners help to pay for what really is regional infrastructure there. So the council back at that time supported an amendment to help get that critical piece of infrastructure in. And I'm really glad we did, because if we didn't have that in during the Verona Road reconstruction, we would have had a lot more gridlock, through the city, not only for our residents, but also for our businesses over there with even some of the truck traffic. The other one that we amended, and the big one, very successful again, TID number 4, this was back when we were in the recession in the early, 2010, 11 there, and we amended that district to go over and help to cover the infrastructure costs for the U.S. Highway 14 Lacey Road interchange. That was kind of our local economic development stimulus, at that point in time to help open up that area and position it and make it more development ready over there. So they've done a lot of heavy lifting, for the community. But with our regional partners there, we really funded some critical infrastructure, that's beneficial to the entire city of Fitchburg and will be for a long time to come going forward.
Thank you. I do have a question. It was on the last PowerPoint, but because of the clarity, it wasn't clear. The length of the life of a TID, is that pretty typical from 2023 to 2032, a 10-year period of time? Can you speak to that a little bit further?
Sure. So the maximum life of this district, since it's mixed use, is 20 years.
Okay.
So Mike mentioned Rehabilitation Tif Districts, which are another type of district. Those have maximum lives of 27 years, because typically you're encouraging reinvestment and redevelopment that takes longer time to kind of bring that increment value to fruition. So this is a 20-year maximum life district, but the development based off of the site plan and the developer's estimate was that they would see, full build out of the site by year 2032. Mm-hmm. So while the district is open for 20 years, they're seeing, construction occur, at a much, more aggressive pace. And that's beneficial because the earlier in the TIF district that you get that development, an increment value established, the longer you have period of time you can collect tax increment revenue on that district. So the later development occurs, the less time that you have to capture that tax revenue from that new value. So it's a 20-year maximum life, and then each TIF district also has an expenditure period. And so for a mixed-use district, that is 15 years. So what that means is within the first 15 years of the district, the city either needs to, commit to public infrastructure projects or commit to development incentives through a development agreement within that 15-year period. Then the last 5 years of a district's life, there's really no new costs that can be incurred by statute other than the annual costs of an audit and just your reporting costs and things of that nature. So there's some built-in milestones to TIF management that's prescribed in statute.
Okay, very good. Need to move on with time.
Yeah. I guess just one more general question. So, obviously there's a lot of talk about inflation and, just general concerns about the economy. Obviously, TIDS, the expectation is that we continue to grow and that when we grow, we can do that infrastructure improvements and it all works out. But obviously there's that risk that if we don't grow, we're potentially on the line for infrastructure improvements that were not needed because we can't fill that in development. Is there being, and I guess I support this TID. I'm gonna vote yes for it. I guess is there like thought in Ellers amongst economic development directors in general about that concern about the future that I just don't believe that we can grow forever. So I just I just have a general concern about putting ourselves out there financially, and we might hit a bad economic period. It's just like a general concern of mine.
Do you want me to start? Yeah. So I think the primary way that the city can help mitigate that risk, and let's use the example of public infrastructure. I mentioned there's multiple ways that the city could choose to have that public infrastructure be funded that provide various levels of risk to the city. So if the city finances that infrastructure through issuance of debt or using existing funds on hand, and then that incremental value in the district isn't sufficient to cover those costs, then the city is responsible for kind of making up that shortfall. So that's a scenario where there's more risk to the city. Where the city has successfully mitigated that risk in many instances is where they will require the developer to pay for that infrastructure. And then if the incremental value is sufficient to reimburse the developer for that cost, they get reimbursed through the TIF district. If the increment value is not sufficient to cover those costs, then the developer doesn't get reimbursed that amount. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum, so to speak, in terms of if there's TIF dollars involved. I mean, you can also require developers just pay for some of the infrastructure outright, and there could be no TIF reimbursement. So I think the city, I think has chosen which way it approaches different financing projects, somewhat due to the nature of the type of investment. I think if it's new infrastructure servicing new areas, I think there's been more focus on pay-as-you-go approach. If it's some infrastructure that's somewhat facilitating some reinvestment and redevelopment, but also has broader use to the city, such as Fitchburg Road, there's been kind of a combination of city financing and TID financing as well. So the project plan gives the city the flexibility to use whatever approach is appropriate for a given project, but I think mitigating that risk is always the key consideration.
I didn't realize that pay-go bonds, I thought it just delayed the period for when I didn't realize that if the TID doesn't grow, that they have to pay for it themselves. I actually did not realize that was part of the pay-go model.
That's kind of the fundamental advantage for the city for using that approach is that, I'm just going to make up a dollar amount. I mean, if a developer constructs $5 million of infrastructure, you agree to issue a pay-as-you-go bond for that amount. And over the life of the TIF district, they generate, $3.5 million of that. The city is not on the hook for the other $1.5 million. The developer paid for the $5 million on the front end. They only got reimbursed a portion of it, and that's how that arrangement works.
Got it. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Very good. For the sake of time, I'll place this motion to a vote. If there's no further questions. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Greg.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We will see you later this evening. All right. And thank you, Mike. All right. Moving on to item 6, action item 6C, Motion to approve Resolution R-138-22, purchase of pedestrian lights for second addition to Terravesa, direct referral.
I move approval.
Motion for approval made by Alder Gerhart. Bill, or Misty, go ahead.
Why don't I start and then Bill can jump in if there's questions. So there are pedestrian lights required for the Terravesa area. It's a new development that's going in. The city is purchasing them ourselves, but we're going to pass the cost on to the developer because that way the warranty comes to the city.
Okay. Bill, additional comments? Okay, very good. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Okay, hearing none. Place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries. All right, moving on to item 6D. This is going to be a little clunky, but I will make an attempt here. Motion to approve the amended resolution R-146-22 direct. And I will read, approving the amended cooperation agreement between the City of Fitchburg and Dane County Urban County Consortium, which allows the city to apply for Community Development Block Grant, known as CDBG, and Home Investment Partnerships, HOME, known as HOME, funding through Dane County, Wisconsin, that administers the program on behalf of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Whereas the City of Fitchburg is a partner in the Dane County Urban County Consortium, and whereas, as a participant in the Dane County Urban County Consortium, the city can apply for Community Development Block Grant, known as CDBG, and Home Investment Partnerships, known as HOME, programs through Dane County, Wisconsin, which administers the grant funding on behalf of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And whereas HUD is requiring participating municipalities to execute an amendment to the existing 1998 cooperation agreement, and whereas the amendment required by HUD to the existing 1998 cooperation agreement and a list of participating communities are included in the supporting documents. And whereas the current version of the amended cooperation agreement includes the amendment HUD is requiring to the existing 1998 cooperation agreement, now be it hereby resolved by the Fitchburg Common Council that it approves the amended cooperation agreement between the City of Fitchburg and Dane County Urban County Consortium. Be it further resolved by the Fitchburg Common Council that it authorizes the mayor to sign the documents attached and directs the city clerk to retain a copy of the document.
I move approval.
I do need approval, yes.
I move approval.
Okay, thank you. Approval made by Alder Wheeler. And who will speak? Mike, you're sitting here? Or? Okay.
This dates back to 1998 when Dane County actually became an entitlement county for the CDBG and Home Fund program. And Fitchburg was one of the original communities that signed on to be a participating community, which then enabled us to be eligible and apply for CDBG and home funds back in 1998. So there was an agreement that was approved by the council, and right now Dane County has approached us because HUD is requiring an amendment to that original agreement, and I've got a copy of that at your place, and there was one in the packet, and it's related to the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and some other legislation there. And we've got Peter Okachaw from Dane County who's online in case there's any questions about those kind of requirements. But in looking in the archives, we couldn't find a fully signed copy of that 1998 agreement. It was missing former Dane County exec Kathleen Falk's signature. There were other signatures on it, but we didn't have one with hers on it. So in consultation with Peter at Dane County, with Valerie, our city attorney, rather than having you do the amendment to the existing 1998 agreement, in your packet was an amended kind of current version of that cooperative agreement that already includes this amendment language that HUD is requiring there. So we thought that it was better, let's just have you approve the current agreement that already includes this amendment language, and then we'll have a fully signed copy for all parties going forward here. We also included in the supporting documents that Fitchburg is already identified from that 1998 agreement as a participating community. We just put that out there as a supporting document from HUD that we already show up because we've been participating since 1998. And then the agreement is a rolling 3-year where it automatically renews unless either entity kind of opts out for it. But just one back history here is when I first started with the city, we tried to go to, there was a state program for community development block grant dollars, and we had attempted multiple applications back in the day, but Fitchburg never scored well on that because we were considered a wealthier community on some of the distress scores. Our income levels were always higher, and our unemployment was always lower when we were competing on a statewide level. So by focusing at more the county level, we're more competitive, to be able to apply for funds. And some of the projects that we did the Renaissance on the park. We've got, I think it was a $500,000 or $600,000 land write down to be able to do the workforce housing single-family development there, and also the Habitat homes that ultimately developed. We secured funding to help with the Boys and Girls Club facility back in the day, and I think now we're getting some money for the Hub project as well from Dane County. Are we, Misty? No? Sorry. Okay. My mistake on that.
It was awarded, but we elected not to.
Oh, okay. But as far as the language in the amendment, we do have Peter from Dane County in case there's any specific language, but this is a requirement from HUD that's coming to us via Dane County for those programs.
Very good, very good. Questions for the committee then?
Yep.
Alder Wheeler.
So was there any systemic problems that brought this about as far as the amendment and the language that was trying to be corrected?
I guess I would defer to Peter on that one.
No, there wasn't. Thank you, Mike. You did a good explaining. I know it can be tough to wrap your head around. Really, the systemic problem was we didn't have the original agreement with all the signatures. As Mike mentioned, Fitchburg has been participating in our urban county since 1998. HUD has verified that, along with 58 other of the municipalities in Dane County. The new guidance that came out from HUD this year required some tweaks in the language, I think regarding some civil rights language, and so they required amendments to the cooperation agreements. Well, without the original signed cooperation agreement, it made it difficult just to execute the amendment, which is why the city of Fitchburg is decided just to execute a new agreement that encompasses all of the language.
Very good.
Thanks.
All right. Additional questions? Nope. All right. Hearing none, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mike, and thank you, Peter. Moving on to our last action item, 6E. Motion to approve Resolution R-149-22, approving the Intergovernmental Agreement regarding town employee severance payments and the severance agreement template, and this is a direct referral.
I move approval.
Motion for approval made by Alder Wheeler. Misty, are you speaking to this item as well?
Yes, please. So as you know, the town of Madison is going to dissolve, part of it going to the city of Madison, part of it going to the city of Fitchburg. Back when this agreement was struck 20 years ago, there was a cooperative plan that was approved. Included in that cooperative plan was a provision for severance benefits for town employees that exist on the date of the absorption. That language is relatively vague, and also it's really strongly recommended that the town of Madison make these severance payments on behalf of the two cities from an administrative perspective, because they already have the employees in the system. They already can do the filings that are required for taxable income and such. So the three municipalities work together. So the town of Madison, the city of Madison, and the city of Fitchburg have worked together to create this intergovernmental agreement that's included in the packet. Couple of big points in there. One is that the town will make those payments on our behalf If this is approved, they will provide a listing for us for budget purposes on August 1st so that we can plan for it. If the town has sufficient cash to make those payments, they will just make the payments and it will come out in the allocation of the assets and liabilities between the two cities. That's what we think is probably going to happen. However, if the town doesn't have enough cash to make these payments, they will invoice each one of the cities for our respective share of these payments, and we will have to pay the town, and then the town will make the payments. So how this resolution is in here now is we're assuming that the town will have the cash. So you're authorizing that intergovernmental agreement, which would have the town make those payments. I also included a clause, though, that if for whatever reason we end up getting an invoice, you are authorizing me to make that payment to the town under this agreement, and then I'll do a subsequent budget amendment out of fund balance to help pay for that cost that's there. So it kind of is letting me have the flexibility for whichever way this ends up going, because timing is going to be pretty important. The other document that's in there is the employee severance agreement. So each one of the employees that will be receiving this severance payment has a separate agreement that they would need to sign. There's a process outlined in the different documents. So the higher level elected officials would sign the template. The finance directors within the 3 municipalities would work through the details of filling in the blanks for each one and making sure that the signatures of the employees are obtained. So that document is included and also would be approved by this resolution as a whole. But there would be a separate individual severance agreement for each one of the individual employees. You're just authorizing that template.
Very good, thank you. Questions from the committee? Alder Gerhart.
One is, I hope it's just a more of a point of curiosity. So they were talking about the final signatures being the City of Madison Finance Director and the City of Fitchburg Comptroller. And I learned in reading the documents that the City Administrator is the Comptroller, not the Finance Director. Is that just a function of the fact of the size of the cities and how I'm just curious why it's different between the two. Misty?
So one of the items that will probably come forward for your consideration is a change in the ordinance at some point to make the Finance Director the Comptroller and then make the treasurer somebody different. But as of right now, the ordinances say that the Comptroller is the City Administrator, and then he's the one that signs off on making sure the contracts are in compliance. So a bit of a difference in how the size of it and just who holds that title.
Great, thanks.
Additional questions? Hearing none, we'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, motion carries. Moving on to item 7, announcements. Our next meeting is scheduled for August 9th, 2022. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn made by Alder Gerhart. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, motion carries. We are adjourned at 6:29 p.m.